Well, we're coming into the second week, or excuse me, the end of the second week of class. You should have turned in your essay on Japanese cost management yesterday, which was a time to get reflective about yourself and how you work at work. It's a huge issue. Once you start to think about it, you can see that the way you treat people and what you ask of other people has an impact on the work that they do, because you can see that what people asked of you has an impact on the work that you did, on what you produced. So going down that path of thinking about this in your own life, over and over and over again, starts to develop the skill that you need to be a cost analyst, because most of cost analysis isn't numbers, it's figuring out how people can change the numbers. It's not the numbers, it's the human system is typically really the focus. Today we're going to wrap up the second week by talking about two things, in particular the two videos that you just saw. I hope that you watched the videos before watching this. It's part of that cycle, that thinking cycle having to do with your synapse trails and formation of memories and thoughts. You need to see something a couple of times. So it's really important that you watch those two videos as carefully as you can, make some notes, and do it without having listened to me at first, because what I say is going to emphasize certain things, but it's better if you had your own opinions first and then you matched it with my opinions. That's that challenge and reflection that causes the thinking to be more firmly established. So let's take a look first at, we're going to talk about both of the videos. Let's talk first about the manufacturing process video. So that manufacturing process video is a standard way to think about manufacturing. Hold on, I forgot my pen. I'll have to pick it up over here. Standard way to talk about manufacturing. And it basically says that there are three variables. Okay? These are the three sort of eternal variables, and that would be product volume, equipment flexibility, and product variety. I probably should have put product variety first. That's typically done, but I didn't do that. Given those three variables, what they're saying, and this was a matrix developed in the 1950s by a couple of professors from Harvard, Hayes and Wheelwright. So this is a very powerful way to think, and it helps you think about what you should be doing, like smart ways to do things. But it's also a thinking box. Okay? It is, if you accept it too much, you won't have done some of the cool stuff that happened in the last 20 years. Because even though this is, true in one sense, and it makes a lot of sense, if you can break through it, you can actually outperform what the predictions are by breaking through some of the barriers. So this model is a standard. Remember, the standardization is you're standardizing on the good and bad things. It's also a thinking box. And so it helps you think through what you want to do, like what type of production do you want. And given your analysis here, we have four typical types of production, we say. Job shop, batch, product line, it's an R, and continuous. And they're exceptionally different, completely and totally different cost structures, completely and totally different skill sets, completely different people that are actually functioning in them and doing the work. So these are dramatic differences. And typically you would have job shop is for things that are highly specialized. What I want you to do right now is something we'll do a lot in the class is I need you to answer a question. And even though you're online, remember, if you just watch me, you get nothing. Because as I've mentioned many times before, I'm not that cute. I'm not that funny. So watching me gets you almost nothing. What happens to, when you get something is when you make a commitment. So I want you to do that right now. I want to ask you, job shop. Typically it means high product variety, very flexible equipment, and low product volume. Job shop. I want you to stop and list, if you can, 2 or 3 or 4 types of job shop, not in manufacturing, out in the economy, service industries or other places. Okay? So take a minute, stop, make your list of 3 or 4. I know it seems totally stupid, and also it really is hard, because sitting there and thinking of this, it's brutal. This is a type of boot camp brutality almost, right? So stop. Give me your list. Okay, I'm back. I never left. You're back. So job shop. What would be some examples? Well, if you were in public accounting in your work term, that's a job shop, right? It matches all of these definitions. A huge amount of variety from client to client. Equipment is really flexible. You don't even have much equipment. You have computers and you have you guys. You guys are part of the equipment in this case. A high degree of flexibility. And you don't produce many audits, in a year. You might produce, if it's individual tax returns, it might be a few more individual tax returns. But even that wouldn't be considered, high volume in most type of businesses. So job shop would definitely be an example of job shop would be a public accounting firm. Another example of job shop would be, a restaurant. Yeah, not McDonald's, but a sit-down restaurant where you order from a menu, and you have a lot of product variety. Notice you have a lot of product variety. You have a lot of equipment flexibility, and they're not serving that many meals, in a day. So low volume. So that would be a job shop. Let's do the same thing for batch processing. Okay, take a minute. Focus your brain and try and come up with 1 or 2 examples of batch process. Okay? There are a lot of examples of this. For instance, a bakery would be an example of this, or even a home bakery. We don't do too much work in people's houses now tends not to be too much batch oriented, but it used to be quite a lot. When I was a kid, my grandmother still baked bread. I mean, my grandmother would not eat store-bought bread. She thought it was terrible. And I don't know, I think I mentioned I come from a Hispanic family. So my grandmother used to make tortillas every week. Every Tuesday, it was tortilla day. She would make several dozen tortillas. That would be her tortillas for the week, right? So she would make a big batch of tortillas, and that's what she would use for the week. And then on the weekend, I forget which day it was, a Friday or Saturday, she would make bread, the risen bread, pan. She would make, there's a Spanish word for it, but she would make the bread that we use yeast for, little loaves of risen bread. And so basically the first half of the week, at her house, it was always tortillas. The second half of the week was the risen bread. And she would alternate, but she would make big batches. And she did most of her food that way. So most of her food was done in big batches. Because when my mom was little, my mom was the youngest of 10 kids. So really, like a real Hispanic family. So my mom is the youngest of 10 kids. And so if you're cooking for 10 kids, you're not doing different meals every day. When you cook, you're going to cook a big vat, and you're going to expect to use that multiple times. So cooking has historically been a batch process, even in houses, even though it's not today. So that would definitely be an example of a batch process. Product lines. Let's see if you can do the same thing for that. This one's a little harder. I'll give you a couple examples when you get back. See if you can come up with something that would be like a manufacturing line, but not in a factory. Okay? This one is tougher. And actually, the ones that I know of, when you look at them, they sort of are manufacturing, but they're not making a tangible, or they're not making an industrial product. But Taco Bell, right? McDonald's, any of those places. Burger King, a little bit less so. They do a little bit more custom stuff. But definitely Taco Bell is a leader. Taco Bell is one of the best. All you have to do is look at what they, go in and order anything at Taco Bell, although because I'm from a Hispanic family, I'm not eating at Taco Bell. But, well, if I have to. Like once every 4 years I eat it. They're terrible. But they have great process. One of the best processes in North America. Okay? So if you want to study the Chapter 3 material and see what happens when you really iron your process down, go to Taco Bell. Their production line, it's a factory. It moves in sequence. One thing you'll notice about the workers is when the people make the food, when they see your order up there on the screen, they'll be looking up there. They actually only have to move this way. They don't even have to cross their legs. Their legs just move side to side. They do this. They do this. They do this. And they're done. They only move in one direction. They never have to go back even one step. Their menus and system are so tightly planned that they just start from here, and everything that they need is in front of them at every step for the entire order, and they can just follow it on the screen. It's amazing. So we have production line equivalents here. You sometimes see this also, or used to see it more in banks, for loan approvals, where where loans would go through the system, sometimes in batch, sometimes in product line. Continuous process, you don't see too much outside of an actual manufacturing plant. But the other three, we do have good examples of those throughout the rest of our life. It's not just a manufacturing thing. Okay? But as we look at this, this makes sense, and I needed you to watch that video so you would make a commitment to what they were saying, and you could see that it actually makes quite a bit of sense. But it also is wrong in a way, or it's not wrong. A better way to say that would be, if you're sharp and you can spot some of the places in there that you could manipulate things, maybe you could actually sort of move up and down a little bit to become more profitable. For instance, this is going to be the cheapest way to make anything, is way down here, right? Because what you have is high product volume, but you have equipment flexibilities, low equipment flexibility, and low product variety. So this thing can make just, huge amounts of stuff. But is there any way you can sort of trick the system so that you can actually make a larger variety, but have it seem like it's not as large a variety? And you know what? Yeah. And in fact, that was one of the lines in that video when they said a line that makes the Ford Falcon or something cannot easily switch over to make the Ford Mustang. There was some sentence in that video just like that. And they're right if it's Ford or GM or BMW or Volkswagen, but Toyota does it all the time. Toyota re-looked at this, or they looked at the system and they thought, how can we do this? And one huge problem the Japanese had is they were poor and they didn't have many factory lines. They didn't have many factories and they were small. If they wanted to make 2 or 3 different cars, they had to make them on the same line. And there was no space in Japan. Land is so flippin' expensive. You can't just buy land and put a factory on it. So if they wanted to make 2 or 3 different types of vehicle, they had to figure this thing out. How can we do this and make money? Ford has done it and GM has done it, but they lost a huge amount of money on it. So Ford had a factory in New Jersey in the 60s where they tried to do this and they closed it down pretty quick because they couldn't figure it out. They lost bucket loads of money on this thing. But what Toyota did is they actually, even though they're running a product line, they figured out how to get some of the variety of batch process. So the Toyota, TMMK, Toyota Motor Manufacturing Kentucky, makes the Camry Hybrid, and the Avalon on the same production line in order of customer demand. So they're not batching. They don't have any schedule that says we'll make 5 of these all in blue. No, they accept the customer orders. Now the customers are the dealers, not us. But they accept the customer orders, and that's how they slot the jobs. And so these 3 vehicles, and a Camry Hybrid are pretty different vehicles. Underneath, you know, on the outside they look the same. Underneath, they're just totally different. 3 vehicles, randomly switched. Almost nobody else can do this. Certainly no North American company can do this. And as far as I know, no European automobile manufacturer can do this, and no Korean automobile manufacturer can do this. Toyota, of car manufacturers, Toyota is the most. At the Toyota factory in Cambridge, they used to make 2 cars, the Corolla and the Matrix. The Matrix was canceled because the Americans didn't like it. We bought a lot of them, so it was fairly popular in Canada, but the Americans bought hardly any of them. And our market is so small that even though it was fairly popular here, the total number of sales was too small to make it really, you know, interesting to Toyota. But they did previously make the Corolla and the Matrix on the same line, similarly in order of customer demand. Now, notice what's happening here is they're actually getting some of the product variety of batch, but they're getting the efficiencies of the product line. And they partially learned how to do this from a company I've mentioned before, Scania. Okay? Scania is the world leader in the ability to run multiple things down the line because they are absolutely the world leader in what we call modular design. So you know how Legos work, the things just click together? That's how Scania builds trucks. They have their truck design such that all of the pieces of the truck, just more, it's not like they click together, but in effect, you know, mentally we can have that as the way we understand it. All the pieces just click together. They make big trucks, little trucks, you know. They make 19 different types of truck on one line in 500 colors in the order of customer demand. There's nobody else in the world that comes even close to that. And they learned, or they taught Toyota a lot of what Toyota knows. So Toyota was probably the best manufacturer, best large-scale manufacturer, but their design was not, they weren't that happy with their design modularity. Scania was the world leader for decades in modular design, but they weren't that happy with the quality of their manufacturing production. So they did a deal. So they basically traded off, and Scania said, we will let you guys, we'll let you at Toyota come and look at our work in our design. So you can send a couple of your designers to our design center for a couple of years, let them, you know, work with us and learn stuff. And in return, you send us some of your manufacturing technicians. So they actually sent the Toyota consultants mainly from the US to Sweden to work with Scania. So Scania learned how to do the Chapter 3 stuff that we've learned about. Scania learned that from Toyota, and the modular design, the mushroom design concept, Toyota learned that, or improved their version of that from Scania. So Scania can actually make 19 different trucks on one line, and that would be, you know, now these are all big trucks. They're called Class 8 trucks, so these are big ones. But you know, the smaller city versions of these trucks, you know, for city deliveries, and then the long haul trucks, you know, for big, you know, for really long distances, and then some of the big trucks go into the mines. Okay, so they're an unbelievable range of trucks, all done on the same line, and so it even actually comes close to this continuous idea. Doesn't quite get there, but it's even more extreme than Toyota. Why is this good? Well, you know, portfolio theory. Whoops, I shouldn't have written that down now. Pretend it's not there. I need to say 2 more sentences before it disappears. So, pretend it's not there. What the modular design plus Chapter 3 material does is it allows Toyota to do this at a very low cost. Meaning they can make these 3 vehicles on one line, and it costs them the same as it costs GM and Ford to just make one vehicle. on one line, okay? So that was what modular design did. Scania, the same thing. The advantage to them is they only had that one production line, and their costs are as low as Volvo. Volvo's their main competitor. Their costs per truck are as low as Volvo, but Volvo can only make one type of truck per line. So Volvo has many different lines, each line making one type of truck, and Scania can make 19 different types of truck on one line at the same cost. So what we have done here is lowered the cost tremendously of the switchovers. So we had this, ability to switch back and forth, instantaneously with no cost. Why is that a benefit? Well, the benefit now pretend I just wrote this. The benefit, is portfolio theory. You've studied that a little bit. What that means is, in portfolio theory, what you're doing is you're balancing off fluctuations in demand, or not fluctuations like in stock price, right? Some stocks are going down in value, some are going up, okay? And so what you're getting is a value based on the market averages, okay? So guess what happens here? If you look at these vehicles, an Avalon is a pretty expensive big car, quite a bit bigger than a Camry, and quite a bit more expensive. And the Camry Hybrid is also it's the same as a Camry, but quite a bit more expensive and purchased by different people. So if you look at these three vehicles, totally different groups of customers buy those three vehicles. So that means that they have a chance, and no matter what happens to the economy, probably one of these customer segments will want a car. So by doing this in one factory, they have increased the chances that a customer will want them to make a car, no matter what happens outside in the economy. If certain changes will cause these customers to pull out of the market, and then, like the economy's getting bad, people will buy more cheap cars, the Camrys. If the economy's on fire, they'll sell more Avalons. If there are more people decide to save the earth, they'll sell more hybrids. So what happens is, use of portfolio theory here in the factory so that you always have demand. Same, Scania does it even more. If they're making 19 different trucks, there's always going to be somebody that needs a truck, because at least one of those very different trucks will be sellable, at any, and no matter what the market conditions are. So by looking at this, or by studying it this way, we can see what they did, which is both of these companies, Scania and Toyota, have a production line that works just like that video says it works, but they finessed it so that they're actually able to produce higher variety. And how do they do that? Well, it's all the connections. They worked, both companies, Scania, since middle 1950s, Scania started working on this. This is how long they've been doing this. They just basically figured out that the key thing is not the part, but the connection between parts. And that's where they spend 90% of their effort. And that's the difference. That's what Toyota did too. That's what they learned from them. Which is, if you're putting stuff together, even if the parts are different, but as long as they're connected in the same way, you can run them down the same production line. It doesn't matter if the parts are a little bit different, as long as the way they're connected. As long as the screws, the pattern, the bolt pattern, meaning if you have one thing to screw to another, as long as it's like three screws in the same position, then the guy who's assembling it doesn't care if it's a big part, little part, purple part, different shape. As long as when that person picks up the part and puts it on the car, it fits on the slot, and then three screws, then that guy, the person doing it, doesn't care if it's any one of those three cars. And that's what they do. And so if you ever have a chance to look at cars of the same year, like 2020 Avalon and Camry, line them up, open up the hoods and look, and you'll see everything in that car is in exactly the same place. The radiator is in exactly the same place. It has the exact same number of screws. They're in exactly the same position. The Avalon has a beefier radiator, more expensive one, but it's the same. It has the same perimeter frame, and the screws are in the same place. Every part of the engine is the same. So all Toyota engine, not all, but almost all Toyota engines will fit in all Toyota cars. they have standardized on the bolt pattern that connects the engine to the frame. And they're all the same across all their engines. All Toyota engines have the same bolt pattern. Right? So they can just drop in, so you can have 2 to 3 different engines fit in the same car, and they go in, they land in the same spot, same screws, and the person doing the work doesn't care because it all works the same. It's as if it was the same vehicle. So the magic that they came up with, both of these companies, Toyota and Scania, is they get batch level product variety with product line assembly methods, because they've designed it so that to the factory line and to the worker, the Avalon and the Camry are the same, but to us, they're completely different. But if you want, get them side by side, take them apart, you'll see that every screw is in the same place, it's turned the same way, it does the same thing. Now the pieces that they put together are a bit different, but the way they touch each other is identical. And so to the worker, they are the same car. To the factory line, they are the same car. To us, they're not. So that was, this Hayes-Wheelwright continuum helps us think about it, but it's also a bit of a trap. If we don't stop and think how can we break through it, then we're not going to get some of this benefit. And this is huge benefit. This is one of the reasons that Toyota makes so much money, and GM and Ford and most everybody else doesn't make near as much money off of boring cars. You might say that BMW makes more money, but they're also selling much more expensive cars in a much lower volume to people that want to buy cool stuff. Toyota's making a lot of money selling pretty boring cars, right? Pretty boring cheap cars. So that's a magic thing that they've done, which is penetrated out of the box of this type of thinking. So this type of thinking is helpful, and it's a box. If you can figure out the little piece that you can manipulate it and say, really, I want the cost structure of product line, but I want the product variety of batch. Figure that out. You will do real well. So that's a little bit of the breakthrough position with the Hayes-Wheelwright continuum. And it's a very important piece to know that portfolio theory is important in a lot of places. It's important in business too. Why do restaurants have a variety of things on the menu? Like you go to a sit-down restaurant, they have cheap food, medium food, expensive food, and different kinds, right? Why? Well, put your finance hat on, right? Portfolio theory. That way they can appeal to different customer groups, and different groups of people have money at different times based on based on the circumstances. So what we have is, and this is an example in manufacturing, but restaurants, a lot of places use portfolio type thinking, portfolio theory type thinking that we don't always realize, is what's going on. So having product variety actually is an advantage to portfolio theory. This is also a place that in the West if you pay too much attention to your finance professor, you end up getting busted, because your financial analysts, typically out of a finance program like Brock, they do not apply portfolio theory in this circumstance. What they'll do is something like they'll compute the profitability of each of these three, and they'll say, if you get rid of the Camry, we'll be more profitable. And that was probably true as long as the market doesn't fluctuate and demand doesn't fluctuate, right? But then, if demand, if you do this and you get rid of the Camry and you only have those two, and all of a sudden the economy gets really tight, and you just got rid of your cheap car, you're screwed. That's one of the problems that we have in the West, is the dominance of financial thinking causes us to go against portfolio theory. Because for short periods of time, you can get a higher rate of return by ditching your low profitability product. But you know what? The market always changes. And so if you do the portfolio theory approach, you will accept a little bit lower current profit in order to make that profit steadier through the long term. And this just happened. I forget. Ford just announced they're getting, almost getting out of the car business, sedan business at any rate. you know, those SUVs they sell and the pickup trucks are really profitable. And so they announced that I think the year's 2023, like in 2 years, they're going to ditch most of their automobile production and sell only 2 cars. I think they're only going to sell the Ford Mustang and the Ford Fusion. They're getting rid of all other car production. That just strikes me as the dumbest thing on the planet. Because when you get rid of that, you get rid of the thinking, you know, the intellectual property, the competency, the skill. You also are violating portfolio theory. But you know why they did it? Well, because they weren't making a lot of money on cars, and they're making boatloads of money on those SUVs. For some reason, people just don't negotiate that well with SUVs, and so those things are hugely profitable. And so Ford's, you know, like getting out of the car business because they don't believe in portfolio theory, I guess. I don't know. Now, if they believe in that, but they think it applies only to stock. Typically, Canadian and American financial analysts don't use this type of thinking to compare products. They just look for product profitability, and they always say drop the least profitable one, and, you know, your average profitability will go up. So, okay, so this is a review of that video. It's a really important one. You should think about it. You should watch it again and really think about each of the pieces. That's really an important way to think when you start your own business. But also stop and think about what I said at the same time and say, you know, you will have good business if you follow that, you know, what that video is saying. But, you know, you'll have a little better business if you can break through some of the constraints and realize that, yeah, those are general rules, but, you know, if I can figure out the exception to the rule, I can even do better. So that's step one, manufacturing process. It's really important as you start your accounting career, because everything is a process, everything's manufacturing, you know, banks, hair salons, restaurants. Having a mental model of how work can be done is really important, and so this is our starting position. The next video is also extremely important. That would be the video on motivation by Dan Pink, who's I love that video. I remember the first time I saw it, I was going, yeah, that's, you know, God, he's really got it there. Except at the end, and one reason I talk about it is I think right for the first 2/3 of the video, he's the king. He misses something because he's also in a thinking box, in that he's not very experienced with different types of work. And so he, at the end of the video, comes up with a special model, and it makes total sense. When he's, you know, when he's telling that story, you're going, oh yeah, he's right. But, you know, the box he's in is he doesn't have experience with a lot of different types of work, and so he created a model that for some types of work probably makes sense, but actually for the type of work we're pointing to in chapter 3, this more integrative, you know, type of work that uses everyone's intelligence, not just the manager's, his model is probably a giant mistake. No, it's not probably, it's definitely a giant mistake. Okay, and we'll outline the reasons for that. We'll take a look at some of what his model says in just a minute. So that would be that TED Talk, the Dan Pink TED Talk. I don't remember the title actually, but it's about motivation, which is an important topic.
And as he starts out, you can see that it's mainly psychological research. So motivation. This is completely consistent with what I've been talking about for the last several video clips, especially the IKM model. Remember when I was ranting about IKM model and saying really it's an ethical commitment that leads to good performance. It's, you know, the M model and the K model are people's ethical commitment to both follow most of the rules through, you know, most of the people following most of the rules most of the time, that's M, and people only follow rules because they have an ethical or moral commitment. It's not money or reward. Okay, so I said it to you once in the context of the IKM model. The video should have said it again, and now I'm coming back to say this again. So when we talk about motivation, the idea that rewards or punishments make any sense is foolish and old-fashioned. And yet, if you're to go walking around this building, most of the professors in the building actually believe this, even though close to 100% of the psychology literature, like the actual hardcore science literature, says, no, this does not work. And, people basically ignore it continuously. That's one of the huge values of this video. I mean, I really love this video. Because he tells the story in a very engaging way, in a non-threatening way. And yet he shows, and he actually, talks about the research. And if you want to go back and listen to the names. He says, he names specific studies, go look them up. I've done that. When I first saw that video, I went and, stopped the YouTube video. I wrote down what he said. I went and looked it up, He's totally right. In fact, he underplays it. It's actually even more extreme than he says. The number of papers that disprove this are even more extreme than what he's saying. So, in terms of motivation, what we have here is that rewards and punishments do not work. Or probably I should say much. So you can beat people into doing some stuff, and sometimes, okay. You can see cases where rewards appear to work because people will do things that are specifically rewarded. But if your goal is really to have people make a commitment to your organization and do a good job, that's where it doesn't work. If you want to say, okay, I'll give you a reward if you get this many sales, or you do X, or you do Y, there are people who will line up and do that just to get the money. But they're not doing a good job. They're just going to do whatever the minimum sloppy work is to trick the system into paying them. And this happens all the time. Salespeople that are on commission cheat, all the time. And everyone that's rewarded like that cheats. You know what? Professional athletes, almost every professional athlete that you watch cheats in every single game. Just watch. You watch close-up video. Watch people's hands. Watch people's feet. They're cheating all the time. What their skill is, part of their skill is learning how to cheat in a way that's low enough level that the ref or the umpire doesn't call them on it. But part of their skill is to get so close to the edge of the rule that when they get over once and cheat and they come back, that it's considered by the ump or the referee to be fairly minor. So all high-level athletes cheat, in team sports at least. In some other things maybe not, because it's harder to cheat in a running race, but people still do cheat in running races. But I'm telling you, in team sports, it's just one giant cheat fest, and everybody knows it. And they pretend it's just part of the game. And if you call them on it, they'll say, well, that's just part of the game. But it is just part of the game. And they usually have a cigar when they're saying that. Yeah, it's just part of the game. So what happens is when the rewards, when the rewards are focused, you can trick people into doing certain specific things, but not with their heart, not and do a good job. So that's one reason that companies are always changing their reward system for salespeople, because it never works, and the salespeople always cheat, and then the whole thing is just. But if you want people to come and contribute to the company, to their colleagues, and do high quality work across multiple dimensions, you can't actually use rewards, because nobody is smart enough to come up with a reward that's actually what you want people to do. Because you don't really just want people to make more money. You want people to make more money in a way that leaves your customers happy. Okay, notice that's a much more complicated thing. Just making more money, that's easy. You can make more money and really get people angry at you. And then, that person that made all the customers angry, they're gone. Customers are gone, you're gone, right? So what we really want people to do is so complicated that we can never come up with one indicator. So this kind of system, the rewards and punishments don't work. And watching that video very steadily will show you that. Now, right at the end, he makes a mistake called the results-only work environment. And I really wanted you to watch the movie so that you would believe in that, and you go, oh yeah, that's right. Because now I'm going to tell you it's wrong, and I'm pretty sure I can convince you. And so notice that's the fail-fix cycle. I'm sort of trying to get you into that so you make the commitment. Then when you break it off, this becomes a much stronger memory for you. And the reason is this is very limited. Does this work at all? Yeah, there are. I could list you a couple environments where this makes sense and where it's done. Sort of like Uber, the gig economy. There's a lot of writing done. Like if you read magazines, or a lot of the writing that you would read online is done like this, where you just have writers that don't work for the company, and they just get a gig to write this article, and the editor gives them a little outline. I want it to be about this and say this and quote this, and I'll give you like $1,000 or whatever, $200, and that writer comes back. Notice that's not a job. It's like in our chapter 3 idea of working with people, developing things, improving things. That is just, you go out there, you're a highly skilled writer, and you write this article, you come back, I accept it, probably do a few editorial changes, and okay, this makes perfect sense for that, right? But let's look at the structure of human knowledge. I know, this is an accounting class. Why are we looking at the structure of human knowledge? Well, we will show you. So this is a diagram that talks about human knowledge. It's going to take a lot of focus. You probably have to write this down, because I'm going to say the word known and unknown like 300 times in the next 5 minutes, okay? This is really complicated. This is really deep philosophy of knowledge. It's related to something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which I think it's two researchers in California, like in Berkeley or something. I think they may have gotten a Nobel Prize for that, or nominated for a Nobel Prize. And we'll see, what this, this was partially developed as they were working on the Dunning-Kruger effect. And this will help us, knowing this will help us understand why this is a good but very limited idea. But it'll also show us why Kaizen and the Chapter 3 material are very unique. Okay, so here we can have human knowledge. We say we have the known knowns. Notice that's already a first weird sentence. Known knowns. In this quadrant are things that you know, and you're aware of your knowledge. So you know about debits and credits. You know that they exist, and you know how to do them. So debits and credits, for you, would be a known known. And there's a lot. You guys know a lot. Things you know. If you know how to play baseball, you know baseball's a game, you know the rules, you know how to play, it's a known known. Okay? So a lot of human knowledge is in here. These are things that are known, but they're things that we know and we're aware of our knowledge. Okay? Down here are the unknown knowns, meaning this is things that we know about, but we're not aware that we know. Typical word, the word we usually use is tacit knowledge. And this would be something, and this quadrant is not very important for our discussion today, so I'll just do 2 sentences and then drop it. But there are a lot of things that we know how to do that we're not aware that we know how to do. For instance, if you're ever with like a 6-year-old kid and you're going to cross a busy street and the kid wants you to explain how you do this, try sitting in a really busy street intersection like in downtown Toronto and explain to a 6-year-old how to cross that street. Guess what? It's going to be really hard because you know how to do it, but you're not aware of some of the facts until you attempt to explain them to somebody else. So there's a lot of this. We have a lot of this. It's just not relevant to our business decision, so I'm not going to talk about it. So this is tacit knowledge. Okay, now we're starting to get to the stuff that we need to be aware of. These are the known unknowns here. So when you're reading this, you always start to read, the description with this side. So this is known knowns, unknown knowns. This is the known unknowns, right? Those sentences are getting really weird.
A known unknown, that is when you're aware that there is something out there, but you don't know it. For instance, I happen to know that there's a game called Warcraft, but I've never seen it and I've never looked at it. I've never played it. So that is a known unknown because I'm aware of its existence, but I have no knowledge of it. So I'm aware of my lack of knowledge. I know there are equations in physics, that can compute trajectories of flying objects. I don't know what they are, but I know that there are equations. I know that, there's stock market formulas to compute the option price of certain stocks or other assets. But actually, I do sort of know what that formula is. But, most people would say, I don't know what the formula is. Okay? And so what happens is, this is generally the realm of research and science. Remember? Because in science, you test a hypothesis. And a hypothesis, that means you know something. When you're testing a hypothesis, you're saying that you're aware that there's something over here, but you don't know what it is, so you're going to form a question to see if it's there. So this is most of science. And this is almost all of business knowledge. All the stuff we know in the West, for instance, portfolio theory, anything having to do with finance or operations, okay, is in here. If you can put a number on it, it's in here. Because if you can put a number on it, you already know. You just don't know the answer to the equation, but you know there is an equation. Otherwise, you couldn't put a number on it. So almost everything in our traditional business system, including, operations, present value analysis, any kind of present value, time value, money kind of analysis is in that quadrant. And so there's a lot of stuff here, but all of this stuff are part of the optimization world. And that's a lot of what you've learned in business is how to optimize things, minimize things, and maximize things. Even that type of thinking that you can optimize something means it's up here. It means that it's actually known that something exists and what it basically is going to work. You just don't know the answer. You don't know the optimal number, but you know it's possible to have an optimal number. Okay, then down here, this is actually the biggest quadrant. This is the unknown unknowns. These are things you don't know about, and you don't even know that you don't know about them. And so this is the world of Kaizen. Okay? Meaning the world of going out and asking questions and saying, what's out there? Finding stuff that's actually new and making decisions on it is down here. So these are the unknown unknowns. This is the most important quadrant, I say. And people that are working in more advanced manufacturing or more advanced business would say this is the important quadrant. This is the quadrant of discovery, the quadrant of finding out new ways to do things. There's nothing up here. There's nothing that would be considered a new way to do anything up here. These are just refining old ways. This is finding a new way. So this is the important quadrant. Back to this, results only workplace. That means you have to know what the result is. That means when you hire somebody, you have to specify what their work is supposed to be, like a quality level. That means it can only be here. So this row idea, it can only work up here, and only when you have a pretty clear idea of what the results are going to look like. So a fairly procedural amount of work. So is it a fine idea? Yeah, it's a fine idea. But it's a fine idea when you're in this quadrant and when you know what the results are, meaning it's not going to be a big value producer for you because the improvements, the value creation, the innovation happens up here. Now, once you have the innovation, you have to roll it into the procedural, you have to standardize it. At the point you standardize it, it sort of moves up, but you have to discover it here first. So this way of thinking about knowledge also tells us why traditional, top-down, manager-led, Anglo-Axis kind of companies, why they could only go so far. It's because they're stuck up here. The way they approach things did not allow them to trust enough people to talk. They didn't get ideas except from other fancy people. They didn't accept ideas from orderlies or clerks or just regular people like you and me. And so their ability to find new things is quite limited. So this is also the quadrant of, the angle axis type of management. It's not the quadrant of a management that is going to continue to grow its capacity. So here then would be the quadrant that we're focusing on in this class, is tools to help us move through here. Now, are we also doing this stuff? Yeah, I'm in the accounting class, right? Starting next week, we're going to start working on real routine procedures, like income statements and journal entries. We're going to do hundreds and hundreds of journal entries in this class. But we're going to talk as we do about how to move into here. How can we actually do some of the things we talked about making this system better in a way that assists us down in this quadrant. So this is part of the background information. So go back and review those two videos again. They're very deep, very important. They're important for the things that we agree with, and they're also important for the things we disagree with. Because disagreeing is just as good as agreeing when you look at stuff. Because if you disagree with something and you stop and you say, wait, is that right? That thinking, that's the key part. It's not whether you end up agreeing with them or disagreeing. You working your brain and you're developing your thought process, which will make you a better analyst. Okay? To go take a look at those two videos. Again, you probably naively accepted them. You now have a more sophisticated and critical view of parts of them. Notice I really like that TED Talk video a lot. I think it's great. I think my thing here at the end is related to Dan Pink being in the box of having only worked up here. He just never had a job or worked for a company that was anywhere else. His whole life experience is here. So guess what? He thinks this is the only way things work and the only way human life works. And so that's his box, and it led him to create this, which is a tool for this box. So your box leads you to the tools. I hope, that after listening to me, you'll have the idea that you don't always have to stay in the box. But getting out of the box is tough and you don't even know, right? Because you'll have to work really hard to even find whether you have a box. And, sometimes you can't find it. Sometimes you can. Sometimes. But the effort is always worth it. Yeah. That's the end of this video and this week. I will be back next week with some more video segments. And as I said, we'll move into more technical accounting focused aspects next week.